Have you ever wondered why the very person who twists reality around you can feel like the only one who truly loves you? Imagine standing in a dimly lit room where shadows flicker across cracked mirrors, and every reflection seems familiar yet strange. That whisper in your chest, the one that aches for recognition, pulses louder when he denies, confuses, or vanishes. You mistake it for desire, devotion, or intimacy, yet it is nothing but the echo of a trauma buried deep inside you. The little girl who once needed safety now clings to the volatility of a man who cannot give it, and every contradiction becomes a spark of false warmth. Your body remembers before your mind does, pulling you towards someone whose presence both terrifies and comforts. Each apology, each tender word after cruelty, sets a silent trap, making the heart believe it has been chosen, even as it bleeds quietly. You feel alive in his gaze, though it is a reflection of your own yearning. The moment you step back, the fog of his manipulation settles into clarity. What masquerades as love is often the shadow of a wound seeking to be healed through another's inconsistency. And yet, you return, drawn by an invisible thread that seems to tie your pulse to his unpredictability. Can it be that the love you crave is already inside you, yet you chase it in the wrong eyes? The dynamics of this illusion begin in the silent architecture of the psyche, where the anima and shadow play their unseen roles. He mirrors your deepest insecurities, yet frames them as your fault, crafting a psychological labyrinth where confusion becomes intimacy. Every contradiction, every denial, is a brushstroke in a portrait of control, where your trust is both the medium and the canvas. You learn to anticipate his moods, to read between unspoken lines, and to forgive what should never require forgiveness. This constant negotiation with reality erodes certainty, leaving you suspended in a state of hypervigilant attachment. The shadowed flame inside you, the archetype that yearns to burn bright yet remain unseen, recognizes something familiar in his manipulations, something that mirrors its own unprocessed fear. Each encounter oscillates between warmth and cold, desire and withdrawal, shaping your nervous system to crave tension as proof of affection. It is not malice alone that ensnares. It is the subtle interweaving of trauma, projection, and unacknowledged longing, an alchemy that turns pain into perceived devotion. Your body becomes a witness before your mind can interpret. The heart races at his absence, and the gut tightens at his indifference. Memory and emotion entwine, creating patterns that repeat like a forgotten mantra. You forgive quickly because forgiveness feels safer than confrontation, and because the flash of care afterward confirms what your soul secretly hopes, that love is worth enduring pain. Yet beneath the surface, each compromise erodes autonomy, a silent tax on your sense of self. Your identity becomes a negotiation between who you were before him and who he insists you must be to earn his fleeting approval. Small victories, like a smile returned or a rare acknowledgement, become the hallmarks of intimacy, yet they are mere fragments of a whole that cannot be completed through manipulation. You are learning a cruel lesson about attachment, that it is possible to feel adored while being ensnared, cherished while being diminished. And still, the question lingers in the quiet moments. How can something so intoxicating be so damaging? The dance of gaslighting is both subtle and exquisite. It begins with a seed of doubt, planted in an otherwise fertile mind and nurtured through repetition. Did that really happen? He asks, and your memory wavers. He denies, reframes, or minimizes events, and your perception of reality begins to fracture. You find yourself questioning not only him, but your own senses, your own judgment, and even your own worth. This is no accident. The trauma bond forms in these fissures of certainty, in the interplay between fear and hope, pain and relief. It is a paradox. The closer you cling, the more he withdraws. The more he confuses, the more you yearn. The high priestess within you, intuitive yet silent, recognizes patterns even when the conscious mind hesitates. She feels the undercurrent of control, the subtle siphoning of autonomy, yet she waits for clarity, for a crack in the illusion that will reveal the truth. How long can one remain tethered to shadows before seeing the reflection for what it is? Every encounter reinforces the alchemy of attachment. When he apologizes, you feel the rush of reward that your nervous system has been conditioned to crave. Dopamine floods your body, tying relief to reconciliation, hope to submission. You forget that the apologies are often strategic, a way to reset the cycle, not repair it. The mind constructs meaning where there is none, turning manipulation into narrative, pain into passion, contradiction into intimacy. And in this repetition, your own desires become secondary, sculpted by the rhythms of his behavior rather than the truth of your soul. The high priestess archetype within you senses imbalance, a whisper beneath the clamor of longing, yet her voice is often drowned by the immediate need for connection. The key, long lost or never found, dangles just out of reach, waiting for the hand brave enough to reclaim it. Will you reach, or continue to chase shadows as if they were substance? Each small act of care becomes monumental, each withdrawal catastrophic. You navigate the tension between autonomy and attachment, between self-preservation and the hope that he will finally meet you fully. You oscillate between the ecstasy of perceived intimacy and the terror of abandonment, forming a loop that strengthens with repetition. The trauma bond tightens, a psychic cord woven from desire, fear, and unresolved childhood wounds. You may catch glimpses of manipulation, fleeting moments where reason pierces the fog, yet each return to him reinforces the cycle. Here lies the paradox of the gaslit heart. It can feel alive only through contradiction, vibrant only through uncertainty, loved only through suffering. And as the night deepens and the mirrors crack further, the silent question returns, sharper than ever. Can you recognize love when it wears the mask of control? He speaks with a tone that seems tender but carries an edge only your gut can sense, a subtle vibration that unsettles before it charms. Every word becomes a test, a boundary quietly redrawn in ways you barely notice. You may catch the inconsistency, a promise broken, a denial of memory, but the spell lies in your own longing, your desire to believe, to be chosen, to feel seen. The shadowed flame inside you burns at this tension, flickering between indignation and fascination, yet you cannot extinguish it, nor do you wish to. You feel trapped, yet you also feel alive, as though the very chaos is a proof of intimacy. The cycle embeds itself into your perception of reality, training the nervous system to crave turbulence, teaching the heart to interpret absence as attention and cruelty as care. In these moments, the high priestess archetype within you recognizes patterns, sensing the silent choreography of manipulation, even while your conscious mind hesitates to act. The trauma bond is an invisible tether, forged in moments of fear and longing, nurtured by fleeting tenderness. Each reconciliation, each rare affirmation becomes an addictive reward, reinforcing attachment even when the core relationship is toxic. Your body remembers before your mind does, mapping the pleasure and pain into neural circuitry that whispers, "He is love, even if love feels like suffering." You may rationalize, "I am strong, I can handle this." Yet every emotional high and low tightens the bond further. In the quiet hours, you find yourself asking impossible questions. Am I overreacting? Or do I deserve this? The answer lies not in him, but within the shadowed corridors of your own psyche, where early wounds echo in the present, demanding resolution through repetition of familiar, though harmful, patterns. Every withdrawal he imposes mirrors past absences, and every apology he offers mimics a fleeting sense of safety once known in childhood. The interplay of memory, expectation, and desire creates a cycle that seems inescapable, yet is rooted in understanding the archetypal forces at play. Gaslighting is rarely blatant. It is a slow erosion of certainty, a reframing of your perception so that your own mind becomes a terrain of doubt. You remember a conversation differently than he does, yet he insists his version is reality. Over time, this distortion seeps into the spaces where your self-trust once resided. The high priestess within you feels this imbalance, sensing subtle manipulations, yet the desire for connection overrides the warning signals. Each instance of denial or contradiction becomes a challenge to your self-perception, teaching you to question your own instincts. The emotional tension it produces is intoxicating because it mirrors the unresolved relational trauma within you, activating the same fight-or-flight circuitry long dormant. You may feel love, yet it is a love shaped more by survival instinct than mutual care, more by psychological compulsion than conscious choice. There is a strange beauty in the tension. It feels like awakening, like being seen in a way no one else has seen you, yet it is hollow at its core. Every tender gesture that follows cruelty is magnified because your psyche has been trained to anticipate withdrawal, not consistency. This intermittent reinforcement strengthens attachment with the force of repetition, much like the rhythmic beat of a drum compels movement. Your body recalls the first time attention was given, the first affirmation after neglect, and interprets these events as signs of deep connection. The paradox is that the intensity you feel is less about him and more about your nervous system's conditioned response to unpredictability. You chase him not for who he is, but for the reflection of your own unacknowledged needs. And in this chase, the silent oracle inside you watches, knowing that liberation begins the moment you distinguish desire from dependency. The question of autonomy versus attachment becomes acute when the cycle reaches its apex. You may attempt to assert boundaries, to reclaim your sense of self, only to meet resistance, confusion, or guilt tripping. Each encounter tests the elasticity of your emotional resilience, and each compliance strengthens the loop. The shadowed flame recognizes the danger yet continues to flicker, drawn to the intensity of the bond. You may wonder why letting go feels impossible, why the pull toward him is magnetic even when every rational thought warns against it. The answer is in the subtle wiring of early emotional experience. The body remembers the very ache that drives the mind to rationalize, to forgive, to hope. You are not weak, you are conditioned, responding to patterns that once signified survival. Understanding this is the first step toward disentangling desire from trauma, attachment from authentic intimacy. Small acts of reclaiming awareness become transformative. Naming the experience, recognizing the pattern, sensing the manipulation before it settles, all begin to loosen the hold. Each realization is a spark, a crack in the mirror that reveals the difference between love and trauma. The high priestess within you senses that autonomy is not cruelty, that saying no is not abandonment, that self-respect is a form of power. The key to dissolving the bond lies not in demanding change from him, but in reclaiming control over your own emotional landscape. The tension remains, because recognizing manipulation does not immediately erase desire, but with each moment of clarity, the cord weakens. Your body begins to recalibrate, learning that stability, respect, and consistency exist and are attainable outside the patterns of pain you once accepted. And yet, as the shadows of memory and longing linger, one question gnaws quietly at the edge of awareness. Will the heart unlearn its hunger for chaos before it seeks it again? Every conversation leaves traces, subtle fingerprints on your psyche. He apologizes, explains, or charms, and your nervous system floods with relief. You remember the ache of absence, the sting of contradiction, and interpret the return of warmth as proof of devotion. Each cycle reinforces itself. Confusion becomes intimacy, pain becomes proof of depth, and inconsistency masquerades as passion. The high priestess archetype within you observes, a silent sentinel aware of patterns long before the conscious mind admits them. She senses the ritual of manipulation, the predictable rhythm of withdrawal and return, yet the body responds automatically, craving the tension that signals care. You may rationalize, "This is love," while your instincts whisper otherwise. That whisper is the shadow speaking, the part of you attuned to truth even when desire obscures it. The alchemy of gaslighting is not in the cruelty itself, but in its ability to make you feel alive in ways that mirror deep, unresolved longing. He reframes your perception of self, your actions, your emotions. "You're too sensitive," he says. "You imagined it, you're overreacting." Each denial of your reality is a seed planted in fertile soil, growing into self-doubt that blooms in silence. You question your memory, your judgment, and sometimes your very worth. Yet the intermittent flashes of kindness, the brief affirmations of affection, become a currency of hope, and your mind negotiates survival through anticipation. A smile, a fleeting acknowledgement, a rare moment of attention. These small gestures create a paradoxical reward system, binding your sense of love to unpredictability. The shadowed flame within you burns brighter in the contradiction, enthralled by the danger and drawn to intensity. You may feel entrapped, yet each emotional spike confirms significance. And in this confirmation lies the trap. The more you chase the shadow, the more it solidifies as your perceived reality. Understanding begins with recognition of the cycle. The bond is not love in its true form. It is attachment forged in response to trauma, a psychological architecture built from unresolved childhood echoes. Your body, conditioned to equate neglect with normalcy, interprets instability as intimacy. Your mind, craving coherence, constructs meaning where there is none, reframing manipulation as care. Each reconciliation resets the emotional clock, reinforcing attachment and teaching the nervous system to crave volatility. The high priestess within you sees the pattern, sensing danger, yet the soul longs for resolution through connection. Every withdrawal, every subtle contradiction, strength. Ns the wiring of desire and fear, creating a loop that feels inescapable. And yet, even in the tension, clarity can emerge, because awareness of the cycle is the first act of reclaiming agency. The brilliance of trauma bonding lies in its subtlety. He never overtly attacks, he reframes, diminishes, and withdraws. You begin to doubt yourself, oscillating between indignation and longing. Each time you forgive or reconcile, your brain experiences a microdopamine rush, linking relief with connection. You feel alive not through stability, but through turbulence, not through consistency, but through unpredictability. The silent oracle within you senses the rhythm, perceives the pattern, and knows that liberation requires detachment from emotional outcome. Yet desire persists. You crave resolution in the very dynamics that ensnare you, a paradox of the psyche. Survival instincts intertwined with yearning. It is not weakness, it is adaptation, responding to patterns that once signified safety, even if they now signify danger. Recognizing the cycle is only half the journey. The other half requires deliberate recalibration of desire, body, and expectation. Every fleeting affirmation becomes amplified. A smile returned, a message answered, a touch remembered. The body interprets these fragments as proof of enduring love, while the mind negotiates justification for enduring pain. Each reconciliation validates tolerance of inconsistency, teaching the heart that love must be earned through endurance rather than freely given. The shadowed flame flickers at each intensity spike, enthralled by chaos yet yearning for control. You may try to reclaim autonomy, asserting boundaries or resisting manipulation, only to meet resistance or subtle guilt. and the loop tightens further. The paradox is that the more you attempt to control attachment, the more it reinforces itself, because the cycle is rooted in desire shaped by trauma. Recognition of this paradox is liberating, yet the pull of longing remains, demanding courage and awareness to disentangle instinct from choice. The question persists: can love truly feel safe when the body has learned to equate intensity with care? The body remembers before the mind catches up. The gut tightens at absence, the chest aches at indifference, and each subtle gesture becomes a signal, a map of emotional terrain that you navigate unconsciously. You forgive too quickly, not because cruelty is acceptable, but because the rare warmth feels like salvation. Every apology resets the loop, a brief reprieve that reinforces attachment. You may ask yourself, why do I return? The answer is embedded in the architecture of your nervous system, shaped by early experiences of inconsistency and the unfulfilled promise of care. The high priestess within you perceives the cycle, sensing the manipulation and the subtle drain on autonomy, yet the pull toward intensity is magnetic. Each flicker of connection feels like recognition, yet it is only a reflection of unmet needs projected onto someone incapable of true reciprocity. The trauma bond thrives in this mirrored longing, where the heart interprets turbulence as intimacy and absence as proof of significance. Gaslighting works because it reframes reality in ways that feel intimate. You imagined it. It never happened. You're overreacting. Each statement erodes self-trust while cloaking control and concern. Your mind negotiates coherence, inventing narratives that preserve hope while accommodating contradiction. You interpret denial as challenge, confusion as engagement, and manipulation as subtle care. The shadowed flame within you burns brighter in the tension, drawn to the intensity that feels alive. Even as clarity begins to dawn, desire persists, tethered to patterns that once promised survival. Recognition is the first step, yet awareness alone does not dissolve attachment. The body must unlearn conditioned craving, the mind must reinterpret signals, and the soul must reclaim sovereignty over desire. Each small insight, recognizing a pattern, naming the manipulation, feeling the body's reaction without immediately acting, becomes a micro-victory, a step toward disentanglement. Each reconciliation reinforces the bond. The intermittent reward, the rare kindness following neglect, hijacks the nervous system. Dopamine spikes tether relief to attention, creating a compulsive cycle of seeking and withdrawal. You may rationalize your endurance, claiming resilience or love, yet the intensity is more about neural patterning than true intimacy. The high priestess archetype observes the rhythm, sensing the difference between attachment and authentic desire. Boundaries are tested, self-assertion meets resistance, and each act of compliance strengthens the cycle. The paradox is unmistakable. The more you chase the shadow, the more vivid it becomes. You may feel love, yet the object of your longing mirrors only the patterns of past absence. The journey toward liberation begins with separating instinct from choice, learning to crave presence over chaos, consistency over intermittent affirmation. The tension itself becomes addictive. The body interprets turbulence as significance, uncertainty as intimacy. You forgive what should not require forgiveness, normalize inconsistency, and reframe denial as challenge. Every cycle reinforces the pattern, teaching the nervous system to anticipate emotional highs and lows rather than stability. The silent oracle within you senses this rhythm, perceiving the manipulation before the conscious mind does, and understanding that liberation requires detachment from emotional outcome. Yet desire remains, a shadow of unresolved longing, compelling the heart to seek resolution in dynamics that mirror early wounds. Awareness begins to loosen the cord, revealing that what feels like love may be the body's echo of unhealed trauma. The first sparks of autonomy appear in recognizing manipulation without immediately reacting, feeling desire without surrendering control, and observing patterns without internalizing them as destiny. The paradox deepens as small acts of control are misinterpreted. When boundaries are set, they are met with subtle guilt or withdrawal, reinforcing the lesson that submission maintains connection. You may feel trapped, yet each moment of awareness illuminates the difference between trauma and affection. The shadowed flame flickers between fascination and self-preservation, drawing attention to the tension between instinct and conscious choice. Even in the throes of attachment, the capacity for recognition exists. Each insight, each acknowledgement of pattern, is a crack in the mirror that begins to reflect truth rather than illusion. Liberation is not instant, but each micro-victory weakens the bond, teaches the body and mind that stability exists, and allows desire to align with reality rather than projection. And as you sit with the echoes of intensity, one question arises, lingering in the quiet spaces of the heart. Can the heart unlearn its craving for chaos before it seeks it anew? The first step toward freedom is noticing the pattern without judgment. Observe the flickers of tension and relief, the subtle shifts in tone and attention that once felt like intimacy. Your body reacts before your mind intervenes, a map of craving etched in neural circuitry. Each small recognition is a spark of agency, a reclaiming of self from the cycle that once dictated every emotional response. You may still feel drawn, still crave the intensity, yet the high priestess within you, silent, intuitive, and vigilant, begins to assert authority over desire. She understands that the pull toward turbulence is not a measure of love, but a signal of unresolved longing seeking expression. Every microaction of awareness, from pausing before responding to naming a manipulative act internally, weakens the invisible tether that binds. You begin to feel the subtle difference between responding from instinct and choosing from autonomy. And with each choice, the cycle loses its power. Gaslighting and trauma bonding are not failures of character, but intricately wired survival mechanisms. The heart remembers before the mind, interpreting inconsistency as attention, absence as significance, and contradiction as intimacy. Each apology after neglect floods the system with relief, reinforcing attachment through intermittent reward. You may rationalize endurance as devotion or resilience, yet the intensity you feel is largely the imprint of repeated neural patterns formed in childhood. The shadowed flame within you thrives on this intensity, yet begins to recognize the distinction between chaos that mirrors old wounds and connection that honors the self. The paradox of desire and autonomy becomes apparent. Craving does not signify compatibility. Intensity does not equal love. Recognition does not erase attraction instantly, but it illuminates the path toward disentanglement and eventual sovereignty over emotional investment. Every micro-victory reshapes perception. Naming the manipulation, feeling the body's reaction without immediately surrendering, and distinguishing instinct from choice are acts of reclamation. The intermittent rewards lose potency once observed for what they are: engineered spikes in emotion designed to maintain attachment. You begin to see the pattern, and in seeing, you reclaim authority over it. The high priestess senses the liberation embedded in awareness. True intimacy does not require erosion of self. Consistency is not betrayal, and desire need not be tethered to suffering. The cord of the trauma bond weakens as each recognition accumulates, creating space for clarity, discernment, and self-directed longing. Autonomy emerges not as a denial of desire, but as the conscious alignment of longing with reality, disentangled from echoes of unresolved trauma. The paradoxical pull of the bond remains, because desire is a power, all force trained to seek intensity. Yet with awareness, the body begins to recalibrate, learning to associate stability with safety and presence with significance. Each boundary set, each pause before responding, each act of internal recognition reprograms the conditioned craving that once dictated attachment. The silent oracle within you watches patiently, knowing that liberation is a gradual process of claiming sovereignty over emotional response rather than attempting to change another. You realize that love is not in volatility, that devotion is not in endurance of manipulation, and that the heart's worth is measured in its capacity for self-respect rather than tolerance of cruelty. The first moments of clarity feel fragile, yet each builds upon the last, creating a mosaic of autonomy, insight, and subtle empowerment. The High Priestess archetype guides this journey. She embodies intuition, discernment, and the quiet strength of observing without being consumed. She knows that desire may linger, that longing may persist, but also that attachment forged in trauma cannot be mistaken for authentic intimacy. Your body begins to remember differently. Tension is no longer automatically interpreted as attention, and absence no longer masquerades as significance. Small acts of self-alignment accumulate, each micro-choice a brick in the foundation of autonomy. The shadowed flame flickers less chaotically, anchored now in awareness and self-possession. Recognition of manipulation is no longer a source of despair, but a tool for liberation. And as the cycle loosens its grip, one question emerges with quiet insistence. Can the heart finally learn to seek what honors it rather than what mimics its old wounds? Freedom emerges in the quiet recognition that love and intensity are not synonymous. The body, once hijacked by cycles of absence and intermittent reward, begins to relearn its own rhythms. You notice how calm moments feel richer, how stability carries depth where chaos once masqueraded as passion. Each microaction, pausing before replying, naming a manipulative act internally, feeling desire without surrender, strengthens autonomy. The High Priestess archetype watches silently, guiding discernment and illuminating the difference between attachment and authentic longing. Desire persists, yet it no longer dictates action. It is observed, acknowledged, and held without fear. The shadowed flame flickers with awareness rather than obsession, intensity balanced with choice. What once felt like inevitability now feels like possibility. The heart can seek fulfillment without compromising self-respect, can crave connection without sacrificing sovereignty. Every insight becomes a thread in the tapestry of self-possession. Recognition that the intermittent rewards were engineered to ensnare shifts perception. You begin to see patterns before the cycle completes, to name manipulation before instinct compels compliance. The trauma bond loses its power as observation replaces reaction, as consciousness reclaims authority over desire. The body recalibrates, learning to associate steadiness with safety and consistency with significance. Each boundary respected, each act of internal awareness reinforces autonomy. The silent oracle within you senses this recalibration, understanding that liberation is not instant but cumulative, a mosaic of micro-choices, each reinforcing the capacity for authentic connection. Desire remains, yet it is disentangled from trauma, aligned instead with what honors the self rather than mimics old wounds. The paradox of attraction begins to resolve. Where once intensity equaled intimacy, now discernment defines desire. You observe the pull toward turbulence, naming it without surrendering to it, and in that act, the trauma bond weakens. The High Priestess guides recognition that love should never feel like fear, that devotion should never demand erosion of self, that intimacy does not require chaos. The body, trained to crave unpredictability, learns to seek stability. The mind, conditioned to rationalize cruelty, learns to interpret respect as significant. The heart, accustomed to tolerating suffering for attention, begins to demand authenticity. Each micro-victory recalibrates expectation. Every act of self-alignment weakens the invisible tether, and slowly, the shadowed flame burns with self-possession rather than longing for reflection in another. Healing is not linear. Moments of desire, flashes of old craving, and echoes of longing persist. Yet awareness allows pause, reflection, and conscious choice. The cycle no longer dictates the rhythm of your days or the trajectory of your heart. Small insights accumulate, naming manipulation without reacting, feeling attraction without surrendering, recognizing the difference between intensity and intimacy. The trauma bond unravels not through confrontation but through sovereignty over perception and response. The high priestess within you embodies patience, intuition, and inner authority, demonstrating that liberation is both possible and sustainable. The silent oracle observes as the body, mind, and heart realign, learning to seek fulfillment outside the mimicry of trauma. And in this alignment, one question surfaces with quiet insistence. How will you honor the desire for love without sacrificing the truth of yourself? Every micro-victory strengthens the mosaic of autonomy. Awareness becomes a practice, intuition a guide, and boundaries a declaration of self-worth. The trauma bond diminishes as recognition replaces reaction and desire is recalibrated to seek authenticity rather than intensity. Each pause before responding, each internal acknowledgement of manipulation, each act of self-alignment loosens the tether of conditioned craving. The high priestess archetype embodies the capacity to observe without surrendering, to desire without compromising, to know the difference between love and projection. The shadowed flame within flickers with conscious intensity rather than compulsive longing, learning to distinguish between real intimacy and echoes of unresolved trauma. The body, once enslaved to turbulence, learns the rhythm of stability. The mind relearns trust, and the heart recognizes fulfillment that does not come at the cost of self-respect. The final question lingers, a quiet challenge. Can the heart finally seek what honors it rather than what repeats old wounds? Autonomy emerges as a living rhythm, subtle yet undeniable. The pull toward turbulence no longer commands instinct. It is observed, measured, and understood. Each moment of pause before reacting, each internal acknowledgement of manipulation becomes a quiet reclamation of self. The high priestess archetype within you senses the recalibration, guiding discernment and fortifying inner authority. She knows that desire may linger, that longing may persist, but attachment forged in trauma need not dictate action. The shadowed flame flickers not in obsession, but in conscious intensity, illuminating what is real and what is projection. Stability begins to feel potent, consistency sacred, and the body relearns that fulfillment does not require chaos. With each micro-victory, the invisible cord of the trauma bond loosens, and the heart starts to recognize the difference between authentic love and the echo of unhealed wounds. The alchemy of awareness transforms longing into choice. Recognition that intermittent rewards once enforced attachment reframes perception. You anticipate patterns without succumbing to them, notice manipulation without internalizing it, and distinguish desire from dependency. The nervous system begins to rewrite its own responses, associating steadiness with safety, presence with significance, and authentic attention with fulfillment. You reclaim agency over instinct, interpreting emotional highs and lows without surrendering to them. The silent oracle within watches as the body, mind, and heart align, demonstrating that liberation is cumulative, the result of micro-choices enacted consistently over time. Each act of self-possession weakens the conditioned craving that once tethered desire to chaos, reinforcing the capacity to seek connection that honors the self rather than replicates trauma. The paradox of craving and autonomy begins to resolve. Where intensity once equaled intimacy, Awareness now defines desire. You observe the pull toward turbulence, name it, and resist automatic surrender. The high priestess within you embodies discernment, teaching that love should never feel like fear, that devotion should never demand erosion of self, and that intimacy does not require chaos. The shadowed flame thrives not on unpredictability, but on conscious engagement, balancing desire with sovereignty. Your body learns to interpret stability as valuable, your mind discerns respect as significant, and your heart recognizes fulfillment that does not demand endurance of manipulation. Each micro-victory, pausing before responding, internally naming manipulation, feeling attraction without surrender, reprograms the system, gradually dissolving the trauma bond. Healing is a mosaic, each insight a tile contributing to wholeness. Moments of old craving and flashes of attachment may arise, yet awareness allows for conscious choice rather than automatic reaction. The loop no longer dictates emotional rhythm. It becomes an object of observation. Each recognition, each act of internal discernment accumulates, loosening the invisible tether and reinforcing autonomy. The high priestess within embodies patience, intuition, and quiet authority, demonstrating that liberation is possible and sustainable. The silent oracle observes as body, mind, and heart realign, learning to seek fulfillment outside the mimicry of past trauma. With each layer of insight, the shadowed flame burns brighter, desire guided by self-possession rather than compulsion. One final question whispers in the quiet. Can the heart fully distinguish between what nurtures it and what merely reflects its old wounds? The culmination of this journey is sovereignty. Desire no longer enslaves, longing no longer compromises. Awareness, intuition, and microactions have restructured perception, rewired response, and reclaimed autonomy. The high priestess guides every choice with quiet authority. The shadowed flame illuminates intensity with conscious attention, and the silent oracle ensures reflection without obsession. Love is now defined not by chaos or absence, but by consistency, respect, and authentic attention. Each act of self-possession, each recognition of manipulation, has dismantled the trauma bond and realigned desire with reality. The body, once conditioned to crave turbulence, now experiences the richness of stability. The mind, once trained to rationalize cruelty, now discerns authenticity. The heart, once tethered to suffering, now recognizes fulfillment that honors self-worth. The final realization settles softly, yet with profound gravity. Love that honors you does not demand compromise, chaos, or submission. It chooses you as you choose it.